there's one opening that many chess players are not aware of. Guys, it's the knight c6 defense that you can play against white's king's pawn opening and the queen's pawn opening. I mean, almost every opening that white may start with, even against the English opening. So after pawn to d4, just go knight c6. Now this is called the Nc6 defense, and I've done a couple of videos about this, but I'm not going to repeat content. I want to add more lines to the repertoire that I showed you in my previous videos. So after knight c6, the top played move in the Lichess database is pawn to c4, followed by knight to f3, which we are going to look at. And oh, I can't wait to show you this. There are a lot of traps hidden in this defense. So first, let's look at this move, bishop f4, which is the third common move in the Lichess database, where white tries to play in the London system style. So right on move 2, I want you guys to test your opponent's patience by going pawn to h5 first. First of all, there's nothing wrong with this move. It's just an early advancement of the h-pawn, and you just want to set a simple trap that may happen if white plays the top played move in the Lichess database, as you can see with your own eyeballs, pawn to e3. What? The moment you see this move, guys, just know that it's game over. When last did you win the game of chess in 3 moves? What do you know about Kaspa? Nothing. Guys, the moment you see this move, just remember to go pawn to e5 immediately, and white's dark squared bishop is trapped, just like that. Okay, say white takes with his pawn. This is where you go pawn to g5 period, and if bishop g3, you simply go pawn to h4, done. What if white takes on e5 with his bishop and not the pawn? Say bishop takes e5, same thing. You can go pawn to f6, followed by g5 and pawn to h4. But even better, positionally speaking, is pawn to d6, so that wherever the bishop goes, you simply play pawn to h4 first, or g5, whichever move comes first, then say bishop f4, there you go, bishop g5, and just like that, you just took down the London system in 3 moves. Let me know what you think about this trap in the comment section. Yes, it's very similar to this other London trap, which begins with d5, and then white plays bishop f4, then you go h5, same strategy, waiting for white to blunder with pawn to e3. But I find this to be a little bit common and very predictable. I mean, this trap is all over YouTube, so maybe you can try to spice it a little bit by beginning with the Nc6 defense, cause after you play h5, it's not even clear what you want to do because of this knight here. Alright, say after pawn to e3, then you play e5, then white tries to counterattack with the move pawn to d5, saying, take my bishop and I'll take your knight. And true, this looks challenging cause say if you retreat your knight back to b8, just an example, white will just take your free pawn, and whatever you do, they'll be able to rescue their bishop somehow, maybe to this square or to c3, I don't know. So just a tip in this position, you don't have to retreat your queen's knight. The best you can do to maintain your advantage is to take on f4 first, allowing them to take, and then you take on e3 as well. So what is happening is that you're just chopping off all the pawns, and here you're going to see most of your opponents playing this in-between move that comes with check, c takes d7. But you know what? You can just simply take back with a bishop, and if they take back your pawn, they'll remain with an isolated pawn on the center, and Stockfish gives you a negative 3.5 advantage, which is suffice to win the game. It's not just about winning the London bishop. It's also about emerging with a favorable pawn structure and a better position for the endgame. E.g., you can start with queen h4 check. If pawn to g3 is played, you don't even have to go queen e4 in this position. This is not check. The move is queen b4 check. You just want to win another free pawn. Let's say knight d2 is played. You have an option to take this free pawn and mess up white's pawn structure, or even better, just castle long, cause why should you even bother taking pieces that are already dead? Say rook b1, they try to defend their pawn. The whole idea is just to be ahead in development and put all your pieces on their most active squares. For example, bishop c5 attacking this pawn, and say after pawn to a3, you can just retreat your queen back to b6, like queen b6 or queen a4, it doesn't even matter. And whatever white does, say you play queen c6 attacking this rook, it's you who is ahead in development. Queen f3 in an effort to exchange queens, say rook he8. Note how white can't even exchange queens. What am I saying? Look at the eval bar. Stockfish doesn't lie when it comes to these kinds of positions. Black is completely winning in this position. Anyway, so again, d4, knight c6, bishop f4, h5. Let's say you're playing this defense in a longer time control match or in a classical tournament, and then your opponent starts playing some non-committal moves, say pawn to d5, trying to gain some more central space. Even after this, you can still go pawn to e5. Remember, this is as good as playing e3 and then you go e5, then pawn to d5, the line that we just finished looking at. Once again, if pawn takes, you can just take back the bishop because bishops are more powerful than knights, especially in positions like these. So they first of all take on d7 with check, after which you can just take back. Once again, you can see that Stockfish gives black an advantage even in this position due to piece activity and development. Your simple strategy is just to castle long and start attacking right away. Never should you think of defending at any point when you are playing an aggressive opening. So the key is just to put your pieces on the most active squares and try to find your opponent's weaknesses. Right, let's say knight to c3, because what else can white do? In this position, just pave way for your king, and after something like queen d3, you can castle long if you want, or develop a piece so that if white castles long, you take a free pawn. So say after d4 you go knight c6 the mechanas once again, and then white plays bishop f4. We're still in the London line. Let's try to see what else white can do. Maybe a better continuation after h5. We saw that both pawn to e3 and d5 gives black a huge advantage. So what if white plays knight to f3, a natural move? We'll come back to c4 by the way. Against any non-committal move, I suggest you go the Chigorin style with pawn to d5. The plan is still the same. Develop your light squad bishop, play queen d7 and castle long. That's in a perfect world. So say white plays pawn to c4 in this position, counterattacking on the center. Now this is when you can play bishop f5 or even better bishop g4. The idea is just to take the knight given a chance. If pawn takes, like what they like doing, you don't even have to take right away. First, get rid of that knight and say after pawn takes, this is when you play queen takes d5. Yes, knight c3 comes with tempo, but that loses a pawn on the spot. So this is winning once again for black. So after you play bishop g4, white doesn't have to take because of this, followed by queen takes d5. Don't even think of knight d5. You can just take. This is black's main prayer, by the way. If bishop takes, here you can even go pawn to f6, buying time on this bishop. Say bishop f4 is played, and there's even this free pawn here, which you can take advantage of. Oh, not really free because white has queen a4 check, but you can try to offer a queen exchange here, because if they take, you're going to be up a pawn forever. So let's say white takes on c4. Trying to equalize the game, you always have pawn to e5, by the way. But the way I would start this attack is by castling long first. Why? Because sooner or later, white may blunder with this move, pawn to e3, which allows the move pawn to e5 once again, in an effort to try and trap this bishop, this stupid bishop. And worse off in this position, say after white takes on e5 with his pawn, well, it's not about the bishop anymore, it's about the king, and that is checkmate. So that's just how tricky things can be with this mechanas line. I've never seen anything like this on YouTube anywhere, so be sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you're enjoying so far. What else? Say instead of knight to f3 here, what if white plays pawn to c4, kind of the queen's gambit setup with the dark squad bishop already out? Well, the way I like playing against these pawns is to go pawn to d6. Always remember this move. Yes, pawn to d5 also works. This may somehow transpose if white plays knight to f3 on the second move. If pawn to e3, by the way, once again you can just go pawn to e5, and whichever piece takes, let's say d takes e5, you simply go g5 in an effort to try and trap that bishop once again. But cd may happen before that. And another key takeaway here is whenever white attacks your knight on c6, provided you have a pawn which is attacking the bishop, I suggest you take that bishop, because in this specific line, white's London bishop is more active than our knight. So I'll simply take, allowing them to take. Worse off, this comes with an in-between move, queen takes d1 check, making white lose his right to castle, and then simply take on e3, forcing white to double up his pawns. If they play c takes b7, an in-between move, well, I can simply take. Like it or not, f takes e3 will happen sooner or later, and this is when I can just castle long. once again, this is winning for black. Right, so in the c4 line, if you want, you can play the main move pawn to d6 or simply go pawn to d5 again. And there's this line where white takes first, but even against this, you can just go ahead and take. Guys, don't be afraid of knight c3 as long as white's d4 pawn is hanging. So you can just go ahead and grab that pawn. Okay, let's say white takes. What else? You don't even have to take here. You can just retreat your queen. Let white take you so that they can help you develop your light squad bishop with tempo. You're attacking the bishop. If they play bishop f4, you now go pawn to e5, chasing that bishop further away. If bishop g3, that bishop will be trapped once again. So sooner or later, you're going to see this trade happening on your terms. And then say bishop d2, because what else? Then you just go knight to f6. You have no any weaknesses. Castle long, castle long. I think this is just anyone's game where the best player has to win. But the most important thing, as you can see from the eval bar, black will always be good. Now, before we look at another line, let me show you one more variation in the c4 line. So far, we've looked at the pawn to e3 blunder, the knight to f3 mistake, and the pawn to d5 mistake, and also the move pawn to c4, where I advised to go pawn to d6, even though d5 is also playable. So d6 first. Why d6? Because you're still waiting for this blunder to happen. Pawn to e3 is always a blunder in this McKenna's line, simply because of pawn to e5. And that bishop is trapped once again. I don't want to go over the moves yet again. You know what happens if d takes, you just go pawn to g5, done. But once again, after you go pawn to e5, say white doesn't take with the pawn or the bishop, but rather goes pawn to d5, attacking your knight. If you don't know what to do, once again, you can just take that bishop. This trade is only good for black, but here you have an opportunity to win this bishop for free. So you can just retreat your knight back to b8. Where is this bishop going to go? That bishop is a dead piece, like for real. I mean, white can't stop this attack with his elbow or whatsoever. Anyway, so that's just about that. That's why I advise to play pawn to d6 against this c4 line. So once again, just go pawn to d6, waiting for this blunder. But if white plays something like knight to f3, a decent move, because of this pawn advancement, you can even switch back to the fianchetto setup. You put your knight on f6, but more importantly, you should always delay castling. Maybe in the near future, you may consider to castle long. So let's see how the game may continue in this position. Well, after knight to f3, it turns out that you can still go pawn to e5 because of this d6 pawn. Again, if bishop g3, one piece is dying. If d takes e5, the whole idea is not to take back, but to go bishop g4. So you want to get rid of this knight and then take. If they take on d6 as well, you simply change your mind. This is what we call a clearance sacrifice, because another square has been created on f6 where you attack this London bishop and the pawn on b2. If white retreats his bishop, well and good, this is when you take back. And say after pawn to h3, the intention is to get rid of the king's knight, forcing white to double up his pawns, and then you castle long. Anyway, so it turns out that in the c4 line, pawn to d6 is such a big deal. Again, these are the moves that you're going to be seeing from time to time. You can go pawn to g6 if you want, it doesn't matter. But just go pawn to e5. So that after pawn takes, you go bishop g4. Now, white doesn't always have to take on d6 because of queen f6, right? And we saw how that goes. But what else can they do? Because normal moves here are not working, like pawn to e3 is still a blunder due to bishop takes first, and once the queen takes back, you simply go d takes e5, attacking this bishop, and on the next move, trap it like this. So it's not very easy, you guys. I don't even know what white should do here. Maybe just go pawn to h3 to create room for this bishop somehow. But again, you can just get rid of that knight, and after e takes f3, you simply take back. Yes, don't be afraid of this trade, you guys. Why do you feel jealous of trading off your queen when you have to? I mean, it's white's game. Say bishop e3 in this position, you have knight b4, you want to go knight c2 check and win that rook. So white has to go knight a3, because what else? And now from here, you can just continue playing the normal game of chess. For example, your pawn here is hanging, so you can try to go s6 first, and say after something like bishop e2, maybe, now you go knight to f6, or strategically speaking, you can go knight e7, that looks good, so that after white castles short, now you put your knight on f5, the most juicy square. Say rook fd1, you get rid of white's bishop pair first, rook takes d8 check, king takes, and then pawn takes. Then you go bishop c5. So white has to hold on to his pawn somehow, but this gives you more time to bring your other pieces into the game. Even if you trade off the rooks, I mean, Stockfish still gives black a winning advantage in this position. But here I would play something like rook h6 while trading off my rook, my powerful rook, with my opponent's less active rook. Say rook d2, and this is when I would go rook d6, because after rook takes, I want to take with my king. In the end game, your king should be in front of your pawns at best. Anyway, enough of the London line with bishop f4. Now let's look at another line before we conclude. Let's say d4, knight c6, and instead of bishop f4, white plays pawn to c4, the top played move. Once again, I don't want to repeat content, you guys. If you want to watch a detailed lesson in this line, simply watch the video that has popped up in the card above. But just to give you a hint, against this pawn structure, you want to go pawn to e5. So you're simply getting back to the e4, e5 stuff with this move. Say, Kaspa, what do you mean? Well, the top played move here is pawn to d5, after which you go bishop b4 check first, letting white to do something about this. If bishop d2, you simply exchange. If knight c3 again, you simply take, messing up white's pawn structure. And now since your knight is under attack, you relocate it to the king side. This is a very common knight maneuver that we look at on this channel. Say pawn to e4, the top played move, and now you go pawn to d6, stopping d6. After bishop d3, you can even go pawn to f5 if you want, but just go knight to g6, say knight to f3, knight to f6, castle shot by white, castle shot by black. If bishop g5 is played, go pawn to h6. You chase that bishop away. If they play bishop e3, just know they might be preparing to go pawn to c5. So you go pawn to b6 to stop that. If f4, you simply lock the queen side like this so that the game may now shift to the king side like this. Deal done. Right. What about the knight to f3 line? After d4, knight c6, instead of c4 or bishop f4, what if white plays knight to f3, the second most played move? Well, against this, you can go back to the Chigorin lines if you want, with pawn to d5, so that after pawn to c4, you simply go pawn to e5. By the way, there are a lot of things that you can do. Knight to f6 is also fine. Bishop f5 is not much of a stretch, but I just like pawn to e5 being more aggressive. If knight takes, I can simply take back on e5 with my knight, and after d takes e5, I simply go pawn to d4, kind of the Albin counter gambit. If pawn to e3, the top played move in the Lichess database, now I go bishop b4 check, or even better, bishop c5. Next, I'll develop my light squared bishop anywhere I want. If e takes d4 is played, the idea is to take back with the queen. This trade is only good for black. Say f4, you simply go bishop f5. Why is this good for black? Because you're simply ahead in development and you just took a d4 player out of his prep. This is no longer the d4 opening that they know. Now this would just be anyone's game. Anyway, another way you can play against the knight to f3 line after knight c6, say knight to f3 once again. If you don't want to play the Chigorin style, you can also try to transpose this back to the Mexican defense with a move knight to f6, waiting for white to make a move. For example, if white plays pawn to c4, the top played move in this position in the Lichess database, you can even transpose this back to the Budapest depending on your test, beginning with the move pawn to e5, because if they take with the pawn, you now go knight g4, counter-attacking this pawn. If they play bishop f4, the top played move, this is exactly what you get in the Budapest. Remember, now you go bishop b4 check, and this is where you see most of your opponents playing knight bd2, blocking that check, because obviously they couldn't block this check with their elbow or with their stomach. And so after this, you simply go queen e7, and this is where you see this amateur trap happening. After pawn to a3, you simply ignore this attack and play knight g takes e5, because if white takes your bishop, you can simply mate them like this, smothered mate. Follow me on Patreon if you want to learn some more serious chess, and be sure to subscribe so that you can encourage me to continue making more wonderful videos just like this one. Let me know what you think about this, and in my next video I will show you how you can still use this knight c6 defense against the king's pawn opening and the English opening. But for now, bye bye.